Good morning, friends of the channel. I've been looking for a piece of furniture like this for years. This is the classic printer's chest of drawers that was traditionally used when newspapers and advertisements were still printed in a print shop in the past. And they were kept in its drawers, which are all divided into small squares and rectangles, which were the compartments where there were letters, punctuation marks, and more. It is a piece of furniture that is many years old. This one I recovered from a factory, and it was sold with many other pieces. Unfortunately, there are no more left now, and I managed to get one for myself because I would really like to turn it into a jewelry cabinet where you might put earrings, bracelets, and so on. Look here, it's beautiful because it has so many small grooves, all different. It is also true that it is very damaged and worn out because it was in a factory. So I need to clean it, sand it, and also clean the inside because there is a black patina that has settled over time. There is work to be done. Look how many drawers it has. Let's start, but today for me it is almost a dream, so I will work daydreaming. Underlying layers of paint, and it's shaped to achieve a very antique chippy look. A piece like this can't be made new, with perfect and smooth lines. It makes no sense. If you want something perfect, white, or without scratches, buy something new, because the beauty of this chest of drawers lies in the signs of wear and the dents. However, I need to remove these, even though I am obviously keeping the handles and the name plates. I'm sorry, because the writing is vintage. I like it a lot, but I can't. I can't paint with this plastic coating and the paper is stuck underneath. I will avoid damaging the paper, and I will use a spatula to remove it. I like them a lot, so I would still like to try to save them and use them elsewhere. I especially love the numbers. I like their graphics. They will look better on a much more industrial piece of furniture. Franco and I had cut these small squares to use as legs, but they are too sharp, so I will use the sander to slightly round off the edges and make them smoother. First of all, I'll sand the central parts with the sander, since this is very dirty and our bar won't clean them. So I smooth the top parts and the sides, and also the front panel, the top part of the front panel, not the front. At least one surface is cleaner. I have my sander connected with a vacuum cleaner and I don't make dust. Before putting it in the house, it needs to be cleaned, painted, and everything else, and we need to start with a base that allows the paint to grip. The surface needs to be washed with Arbar, hot water, baking soda, and ammonia already in the bucket. Abrasive sponge, the scrubbing one, the one used for dishes. And you use this mixture to wash the entire surface. Emma is also holding a small brush in order to go deep where needed. Let's wash. Franco and I decided to add these 4 small cubes below as feet because they raise it slightly. These 2 centimeters are enough to give it a different look. I assure you it will be very nice. Don't mind the wooden color differences. We have washed it well and even laid it on its back to clean it underneath and inside. I mean to make the most of the damaged, worn base of this chest of drawers. That's the beauty of it. The beauty of this chest of drawers is its years, the dents, the scratches, everything. So I will do 2 steps. First, I will use a lighter color, Rocher, a beautiful, rich hazelnut, and add some Magic Star powder, my textured powder, into the bowl. Why? Because the base in many places is worn and textured. And I don't want it to contrast with the overly smooth paint. So I will apply the paint using a textured application thanks to the King brush, which is a very large brush, and, if desired, creates a very thick brushstroke when the textured powder. I will highlight the underlying defects, so I won't cover them. I have stirred the color well so all the components are mixed. I will add some of it to the powder. I added about 2 tablespoons of Magic Star powder to 250 grams of paint, which will be enough to do the entire first coat, and it will be very covering. As I mentioned, I will then do the second coat with a much darker contrasting color. I mix it well to make it nice and homogeneous and try to ensure that this lovely creamy paste becomes one. It won't be a too thick mousse. It will be quite fluid as I need some texture in the application, but not too rough. As you can see, with this very nice big brush, I can create a beautiful and covering brush stroke. Magic Paint is fantastic for these uses because it has an exceptional application. Fluid, velvety, smooth paints are not the same. They would not highlight the beautiful structure of this piece of furniture. On the other hand, look how the texture of chalk paint changes everything. It's something different because it makes the whole thing look grainy and neat. It does look like real paint of the time. Now I am applying a coat all over the surface, on all the sides, on the top part of the chest of drawers, everywhere, a nice coat of Rocher. I am not at all worried about the flaws and imperfections, because they will be the highlight. A nice coat of Rocher on the structure has already changed the look. It almost looks cleaner, though it might seem basic, but you know I am not into clear furniture. We add slightly more personality with some color. On top, we will apply this beautiful decoupage by Temali Deco called Flora. Flora is indeed the name of this beautiful girl. She enchanted me, and I thought, what better to put on a jewellery cabinet than a lovely female face? So, we will place it on the top surface, which might be partially covered by other items, but its vibrant colors will certainly make an impact. We will apply it using our satin protective paint. We will try to center it on the middle part of the cabinet, but it will be softened and pickled at the edges, so I will sand it a bit to ensure the decoupage border is not visible. To apply the decoupage, I spread the protective paint that will act as glue. I apply it under and over the decoupage, but I need to dilute it. This is the thickness of the protective paint. It is milky white. Let's add about 20%, but you know that you only need to weigh the water in the protective paint if you have issues. Otherwise, don't worry, because it won't affect the protection. If you make a mistake and add too much water, you can apply a second coat. Using the technique of applying the protective layer underneath, since diluted, it penetrates the decoupage well and makes it one with the surface. It's difficult to remove decoupage from the paint, right? Even if you remove paint and sand, it does not come off so easily because the protective coating becomes one with the decoupage sheet. Add a bit more. You sometimes ask if you can use glue or something else, but trust me, once it grips and dries properly, it's not easy to remove it. I add a little at a time, so the protective paint absorbs the water. And then we apply it. This can is new, so it must be diluted. To apply it, I can use any brush. Now I have the architecture brush and I use it. Of course, the base needs to be quite thick. You start with the decoupage, preparing it so it doesn't dry out. You need to be quick, so as soon as you have applied the protective layer, and you need to apply it thickly, you immediately proceed with the application of the decoupage. It might also be necessary to reapply the protective paint. We start applying it, and if we see that when we apply the decoupage the protective layer is already slightly absorbed by the surface, we can reapply it lightly. I would add a bit more in the middle. It's okay to add more because it's absorbed by the paper, and I will also need it on top, so I don't mind if I put a bit more. Is this all right? Yes, perfect. Let's apply one part well, and we'll do the second one later. Let's start by searching the decoupage, which really needs to be full of protective paint to adhere well to the surface. Look at how the colors change and become more vibrant. Don't worry about the wrinkles, because once we have soaped it, we lift it up and then lay it back down. This is because the material of this innovative decoupage is so resistant, right, Emma? Yes, and it doesn't worry us at all. So we can easily lift it. Hold it for me, thanks. I'll reapply some protective paint underneath. If it has already absorbed a bit, we'll add it. Perfect. Now we lower it again. Hold the edge for me. Hold it, please. We'll lower it again. Likely we're applying wallpaper with a spatula. We need to get all the air out from underneath and do the same on the other side. We raise less. Hold it up. Let's also put some protective paint on this side if it has already been absorbed, so it is nice and full underneath. And we do the same thing over here. It is very important you apply this decoupage using a lot of protective paint so that once it is glued, it won't come off. The secret is to put it well, moisten it a lot. Don't be afraid of ruining it because, look, now I won't touch it anymore, and look at how beautiful the colors are, vivid, bright and strong. It hasn't been damaged or worn out, and the paper is still vibrant. Obviously, if you pull up, down, 20 times, it might get damaged. Today I used this brush to show you that it works well even with a different brush, that with the proper one, I can apply the perfect pressure and it turns out even better. If you don't have it, use a different brush. This one is optimal for this project. Now we let the decoupage dry. Of course, I cannot use a hairdryer because it has to dry and be absorbed by the surface to become one with it. And what do I do? When it comes to faces and very delicate things to match, to put together, you can also wait until the first sheet is dry to put on the second one. What does it mean? It means that if the first sheet retracts as the surface absorbs it, the second one will not have this unsightly line. So I apply Nuit Parisienne and let the decoupage set and dry before applying the second one. We are using Nuit Parisienne because I want to give this beautiful chest of drawers a very industrial, but also somewhat chic touch, so we can't take that away. We use an architecture brush as it works well in corners, and it's perfect to apply a textured coat of paint due to its horsehair bristles. Pure paint and one coat will be enough. The decoupage has started to dry. The wedge gloss of the protective layer is not noticeable, but it has been absorbed and dried. We are not in the sun, it's not even hot today, so it will take longer. But it's time to start putting the other sheet because the first one is dry. I take some protective paint and, as I did before, I make a nice and damp base. You know that if needed, we will reinforce the wet base because it needs to be as adhesive as possible, and I will also slightly overlap the two sheets of the decoupage. Let's start placing it, but we will need to raise it and replace it. Perhaps a little more perfect. That's too much. We try to feel with our finger and try to get as close as possible. Perfect, the important thing is to ensure the joint adheres well. Bring it close and I start to dampen. Now let's apply a first coat of protective paint all over. Then we will need to raise it and lower it again. First on one side, then on the other. Do this when the paper is nice and damp, because the thickness of this paper allows it. This has been specifically designed to be worked with a good amount of moisture. So let's do half, first under. Halfway up. How is it? Does it need more?
Yes, a bit more.
Go a bit more. Good. So we re-moisten the underside because if it is damp, it sticks even better. I'll help you. 1. And over here as well. Let's remove all the air that might have formed underneath in the decoupage. Now from here, lift it up and I put some underneath. Perfect, that's enough. I'll take some more.
And voila, it's finished. Let's leave it to dry.
Naturally. You have to understand that for the face to be perfect, it must dry naturally. So, finish carefully checking that there are no imperfections. Here on the central edge, I am putting some more protective paint because I want it to be nice and well attached. I check there are no unsightly veins and I smooth the surface with the brush like this. I am not going to apply the protective coat on the other side at the moment because it is still wet and drying. I am doing this to remove the reach of the protective coat. All right, let's leave it to dry thoroughly so the fausse reconnects. The decoupage is finishing drying deeply, so it is no longer sticky and the dust we are about to make won't be absorbed. If you don't want to raise dust at home and make a mess, use a damp cloth first, then do what I am doing. I don't do it as it smooths the surface excessively. I want a rougher surface in this case. Keep different grit abrasive sponges at hand, the fine and medium ones. Avoid the coarse one that scratches too much. And some spatulas, because these will help you achieve a nice lateral wear as well. I start with this abrasive sponge, the medium one, but don't be fooled, it has been used, which means it scratches less than a normal medium one. And I am going to highlight the edges and the very chipped parts. The beauty will not only be the handles and the borders, but the parts where there is this damaged base, and that is what today makes the difference, okay? Can you help me do the same thing on the side? The handle is beautiful. Of course, we will also touch this part here, which is the label section that Emma and I will put on next. And here, look how absolutely beautiful it is when you highlight the underlying part. It is always different. By removing the dust, the perfect color tone comes up. Beautiful. See how it changes. Before and after. The wear came out beautifully. Let's continue. The furniture has been fully pickled. I love the bottom part. Do you? Yes, yes. We should work on the labels to put the numbers, but I trust you. Now comes the more laborious part, which is up to you to reproduce it. But you know how we are. We teach you everything, and then it's up to you to make it perfect on your piece of furniture. Maybe you can also change the colors. The secret to make the pictorial retouching, which we're now going to do on this piece of furniture, come out really well is to remove the slight unevenness of the decoupage, which is completely adhered because we applied it yesterday, and let it dry overnight. Now we're back at work and we're doing this. So Sander, you put a very fine paper. At 240. We're going to take away this unevenness that there is between the wood of the furniture and the decoupage. I don't mind if I go and take away a little bit of color because it can be restored with the color shading, and then I start to have fun with the brushes. Thank you. I'll use the cordless sounder. It's wonderful. Try it. removed the decoupage and it is smooth and nicely stuck to the surface. You don't have to do this every time you use decoupages. I am doing it because I want to teach you how to do a pictorial retouching with Magic Paint colors and to make sure that you don't see where the decoupage starts and ends. But there are many more modern methods of using decoupage because it is true that it is a vintage technique, but if used well with today's new decoupage, which features beautiful colors, wonderful eco-friendly and very durable papers, and very modern textures and finishes, it becomes amazing. You can simply take a decoupage, place it on the doors when they are smooth, and cut the edges. You won't need to do everything I'm doing because the decoupage is smaller than the edge of the furniture. I don't like this. It would look like a stamp on the furniture. Remember that there are lots of tutorials on the Elisa and Magic Paint channel. We have already used decoupages, both from the Temalì lines and the others, that you can find on elisa&MagicPaint.com and at our resellers, to do lots of tutorials. So, if you want to see how to use decoupage in a more modern way, look for the right video. So, we will now apply a first color, a bit lighter, to create a base, because we work, let's say, on multiple levels by steps. So, from here upwards, we will do a first lighter color transition, creating it, and from here downwards a bit darker. So there is a blended base, so that we can work with different shades. Also here, always mixing the Magic Paint colors to have lighter or darker colors, to ensure that everything is in place so that the human eye does not notice where the decoupage starts and ends. So, we took a small container. Here we put some Rocher, which I am going to darken slightly with vintage. Obviously, you try. It's not always perfect on the first try, right? Thank you. It is important to understand that without trying, you won't get anywhere. However, the Magic colors are fantastic, easily reproducible, and easily mixable, so you can find the right shade. I add some vintage, it's not enough. Also remember that colors, when they are wet and just applied, are bright and lighter. However, when they dry, they become a little deeper and darker. It is important to remember we don't finish with the color applied to the furniture, but by using some antiquing methods, we make the base truly spectacular. I have created a shade that is very close to the base one. Remember, this is just a start and it can always be changed in many ways. I am now starting to dab and match the shade as closely as possible. Do not go too dark with the tones because, as you will see in a moment, by continuing with this makeover, you will also learn how to make it look antique and make the surface as similar as possible to the base of the decoupage. So, if you darken the color too much, everything will be too dark. Now, we will start slowly, dabbing to apply a first coat. While it dries, we will dab the second coat to make it even. You must not create thickness between the paint and the decoupage, so work on it very carefully, even take a cloth and do this, so that there is no step between where you paint and where the decoupage starts. This is a very important step because you won't see the difference later. In some spots, it will be necessary to make it more orange, while in others it needs to be browner. Each part is different, so we will work on the base. We slightly darkened the color we had already used, using some vintage and some beautiful, our peach color. Now, using the same technique, we are going to dab. It will be darker here, but I need to find the exact shade. You see that the two shades must blend completely on the sides before working on the base structure. We will create this reddish brown soon. We did a first test because we have to see if we like it. Then we propose it to you. You don't know how many times we change our idea. That's normal. We created 3 shades in my little plastic palette. Royal Green with a bit of Nuit Parisienne, Lucky Forest with a bit of Nuit Parisienne, Olivia with a bit of Nuit Parisienne. They were all darkened with a drop of Nuit Parisienne, my black colour. I darkened them with black because it is a unique black with brown and green tones, and therefore it darkened without making the tone cold. It darkened it while warming it up. Now we work like this. Since the decoupage has no continuity, we also have to decide where to put the leaves. I first go over the base, the background, with a lighter colour. Then Emma will go over it, and she will decide whether to use some Lucky Forest or some Olivia to create the leaves. One of the most beautiful tricks I have studied over the years to make decoupage look truly realistic and genuinely handmade is to bring the colour used for our shading into the decoupage painting itself. So, I often take a bit of colour, as I am doing now, and apply it onto the pre-existing leaves. This decoupage is very easy to use. Try it. As you can see, it already has a painting that was created with very large, textured brushstrokes, so it is easy to do this kind of work. I assure you that this small step will definitely make the decoupage look truly handmade by you. Obviously, we will do what I am doing now with all the colours of the leaves to make everything as true as possible. Emma, carry on. She has already started. She has darkened these leaves with some Lucky Forest, right? I would also add Olivia. This is the leaf before, done with the royal green slightly darkened. This is the leaf after, where Lucky Forest was added to royal green. Can you show us how it's done, Emma?
Yes, I'm simply going to add some Olivia. I'm going to carefully apply some brush strokes and then with a dry brush, I'm going to gently blend it so that it remains smooth and even. If I need it, I add a little bit more of dark and blend it again.
This is a piece of furniture where a true work of art is created, not just an ordinary piece of furniture, so take the time you need. I am going to create the leaves that are missing. I want to create a background. So, using pure colour, because I want it to cover very well, I start with the first coat using a thicker brush. I draw the leaves for Emma, and then she goes over it to finish everything. We can draw leaves. Where there are none, and go over the decoupage. We don't have to worry. I put a drop of black here, to which I also add some brown and an imperceptible drop of water. I do this because sometimes you need to make the leaf stem, right, Emma? Yes, this helps us create the leaf stem too. So some brown. I'll add a drop of water. In this case, to add the water, I use a syringe, a common one. I add drops to prevent it from being too runny, and we stir it slowly. Our mission today is to make people at home understand that they should not be afraid to try and create. They must not be afraid to dare, to try, to create, to paint. Because often painting is scary, isn't it? Especially on furniture. I will still do this part, Emma will finish it later, but we have covered that point by extending it. I'll make another leaf. It's time to apply protective wax, because we did a lot of reconstruction work on this decoupage. Look at the details. We have reproduced the flowers by applying magic paint colors. We also touched up the edge of the lip a little bit to make it redder with our red laugh. It is important to understand we will do 2 more steps, the protection and then the antiquing wax. The antiquing wax provides the decoupage a slightly aged, dusty, vintage patina. I think it is almost essential with decoupage, unless it is a simple and modern style. I spread the wax all over, both on the decoupage on the top and underneath. Use a brush specifically for wax. I finished this paint touch-up last night, so I am absolutely sure that the colors are nice and dry and no longer damp, so I am confident in applying the wax. Always remember that it must cover the entire surface. Apply it both horizontally and vertically. See how the black is coming out with wax. The tone becomes more vibrant, taking on its own dimension. The tone and pigments are hydrated by the application of the wax. So never judge the color when it is not yet protected by wax, by the protective coating, and when it has not yet been properly applied and dried. Because even the wax and the protective paint definitely change a lot when they dry. Look here at this spot where all the antiquing is highlighted even more with a stronger and bolder tone thanks to the wax. I have an obsession with these details. I love the small, original, vintage name plates, rather than the modern ones. I love the natural, the original. Emma created these labels from the on-yellowed cardboard for an even more antique look. I love cursive writing, and I will put a number in each drawer. It's something I absolutely adore. We have already cut the cardboard to the maximum. Here it is. Emma, it needs trimming underneath as it's not centered. A centered number looks nice. We'll trim it. And we cut it slightly below again. So, final touches. An abrasive sponge, medium, new, to slightly wear down the edge. I like it very much. I wear it out as I want this technique to connect the upper top and the lower part with the technique. That's why the top part should be a little vintage and worn, not too much. I'll do this also on the edges, where we worked a lot here too. It doesn't matter if you've applied wax, you can still wear it. I do this on the whole surface. This wax is exceptional. It's liquid wax, perfect for antiquing textured patinas, decoupage, and staining wood and raw materials. If you are unsure which wax to buy, try it. It stands out. Stir well since it's pigmented and pigments tend to separate in the liquid parts, so mix thoroughly. Use a very soft brush and have 2 cloths ready, one dry, one damp. These will help antiquing it better. You decide how to antique the surface, whether to do steps like this, to dab, or to use circular movements. There is no rule. You decide how to make the surface perfectly antiqued. This is one of the steps making the makeover even more authentic. I apply a thin layer across the entire surface to give it the right antiquing tone. And then I will create some different color shades because when it dries, I will use the dry sponge if I see it takes a bit longer to change the sides. So in some areas, I will blend by applying slightly more product, in others less. It is important to always do this with a cloth that is already slightly dirty with wax and to blend well. So you don't need to be too precise with the structure of the wax, but you should blend the colors, massaging them together. Then we will do one more step, the last one, which slightly ages it further with the second wax, Noyer Claire. For the final detail, with a dubbing brush and a bit of Noyer Claire wax, the lighter one, I just dab a little and do some speckling. I go everywhere. I even go on the face and drop these little wax flakes that I love so much. They need to be small. They shouldn't be large drops or they'll darken the face, but a few. Look how it changes as it makes the surface look much more antique. This makeover is finished. It took us a while. We won't sugarcoat it. We started in the morning, continued on the second day, and finished today. Almost 2 days of work for us. Because it was important to let each step dry, the first textured layer, the second color one, before sanding, before applying the decoupage, and letting it absorb and dry well. These steps are really easy if you allow the proper drying time. Decoupage can be done well, the pictorial retouching, the sounding of the edges, if it dries properly. I don't recommend speeding up with the hairdryer. It's not the right technique. I like it. I'm happy. It fits well in the room. I was afraid, as this black sometimes doesn't look good in my home. I'm very happy with it. And I can't wait to fill it with jewellery I'll put in the earrings, my things. I'll leave the bottom drawers for Rosa. She can reach and use them for her things. Yes, I can't fill it all by myself. Write to me in the comments if you liked it and try the pictorial retouching on decoupage. It's a beautiful technique and these Temalì ones are thick and resistant. Did you see the technique? We applied the protective coat and lifted it up and down. It hasn't broken, so it's easy to apply it. It's important to understand that letting more time pass and applying more protective coating ensures the creases disappear and it smooths out on its own. Right? Do you have something to say to the audience? Any advice on shades or colors?
Give it a try. Keep the small cans and try. It's easy.
Yes, and if you want to darken, Nuit Parisienne is perfect for toning down and softening the shades. As you can see, we darkened almost all the colors with Nuit Parisienne. The result is perfect, especially the blending of the parts. It has blended all the colors together. Please subscribe to the channel as content like this is accessible and supportable with many subscribers. It's called Elisa and Magic Paint. Goodbye.